If you're going to pass out in a biohazard zone, at least do it somewhere you won't land in bleach. Those were the first words I heard that night, delivered in a voice that sounded way too calm for a room screaming with alarms, hissing pipes, and a kid slumped on the ground like his body had finally quit before his shift did. That's the thing. You expect emergencies to be loud, chaotic, but the voice that cut through it belonged to Jonas Hale, the janitor. Not that you'd guess he was just a janitor by the way he moved, steady, trained, a kind of quiet you only see in people who've seen a lot worse and know how to keep the world from falling apart. He checked the intern's pulse with one hand, slipped an oxygen mask over his face with the other, muttering, "Not on my shift, kid," like he was promising something bigger than survival. By the time security showed up in a panic, Jonas had shut off the leaking valve, cracked a window, and already saved a life. But nobody thanked him. They just rolled the intern away and barely glanced at the man who'd kept him breathing. That's how it is when you're invisible for a living. You know what I mean? Jonas stood alone on the loading dock, night air biting at his worn uniform, watching ambulance lights flicker out of sight. And then came that voice. Cool, sharp, expensive, a voice that could cut glass. Avery Blake, CEO, standing there like she ran the universe, accusing him of meddling in something he had no business touching. "You're a janitor, Mr. Hale," she snapped. "Stick to cleaning floors." He met her gaze, steady as stone, and just said, "Someone had to act." For a second, something flickered in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe fatigue, but then she turned and left, her reflection splintering across the glass. Back in the basement lounge, Jonas watched his daughter Lena, 10 years old, sleeping on an old recliner with a library book still open on her chest. She waited for him during his late shifts, nightmares never far from her mind since the fire that took everything but each other. That night, Jonas was deep in his own storm, haunted by signs he'd seen before. The same tremor in Avery's hand, the blankness in her eyes. He'd missed those signs once, and it cost him more than anyone could ever repay. "Daddy, you're thinking too loud again," Lena said, waking up just enough to remind him he was more than his job, more than his mistakes. "Did someone forget how important you are again?" she asked, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because sometimes kids see clearer than any adult ever will. "We don't need them to remember, right?" she whispered. "Nope, I remember, and I'm not forgetting." That night, Jonas saw Avery through the boardroom glass, alone, pacing, her hands shaking, her voice sharp on a call, but underneath, scared, lost, maybe sick. He promised himself he'd never get involved again, never save someone who didn't ask, but he couldn't unsee what he saw, couldn't unlearn what it meant to care. He started documenting her symptoms, handwriting clean and clinical, just like the old days, tremors, confusion, photosensitivity, hoping someone would see what he saw before it was too late. There was a twist in all this, one you wouldn't expect. 3 nights later, a janitor's anonymous note landed in the executive wellness box. "Someone should check your cerebellum function before it checks out on its own." No name, no accusation, just a warning from someone who knew how these stories end. Nothing happened at first. Avery kept working, sharp as ever, her armor flawless except for those small, growing cracks. Until the night Jonas heard the soft thud in her office and found her on the ground, hands trembling, fury in her eyes. "You're having a focal seizure," he said, matter of fact, and when she snapped at him to get out, he just caught her before she fell, held her steady, and told her what she needed to hear. Not as a janitor, not even as a doctor, just as someone who refused to let another person die for pride. "Call your doctor. Get an MRI. Now." Later, on the fire escape with Lena, Jonas admitted he didn't know if it was the right thing. "Sometimes you do the right thing and people still hate you for it," Lena said, wise beyond her years, "but it's still right." Jonas realized then that courage isn't always about standing up to the world. It's about standing up for people when no one else will. As Avery's symptoms worsened, Jonas sent a detailed report to HR, carefully anonymous, and the truth finally began to ripple through the silent corporate halls. The COO confronted her with the evidence, not as a threat, but as a lifeline. Jonas watched and waited, not for thanks, but because he couldn't bear to walk away from a story that wasn't finished yet. Eventually, Avery collapsed for real, this time in the parking garage, away from the headlines, but not away from Jonas. He found her, called the ambulance, stayed by her side through the hospital doors, watched as she finally faced the truth she'd been running from. When the diagnosis came, tumor, slow-growing but dangerous, Avery didn't cry, didn't beg. She just nodded, and something old and heavy fell away. Jonas's daughter Lena made her a get-well list, filled with strawberry tea, hand-drawn no tumors allowed signs, and reminders she wasn't alone. That small, earnest kindness broke something open in Avery that medicine never could. That you'd think that was the climax. But no, the real shift came after the surgery. After Avery woke up to find Jonas gone, his letter left behind, telling her he was proud not because she survived, but because she let herself be human. In that moment, she saw what real strength looked like. Not power, not control, but connection, the willingness to let someone see you when you're at your lowest. The twist? Avery brought Jonas into the light. When the company tried to use her illness to push her out, Avery stood before the board and told the world exactly who'd saved her. Not just a janitor, but a man who saw what everyone else ignored. Security footage of Jonas saving her went viral, and suddenly, people everywhere were asking themselves if maybe they'd overlooked someone just as important in their own lives. Weeks later, Avery stepped down as CEO, handing the keys to someone who led with empathy, not just ambition. She launched a foundation in Jonas's name to train first responders from all walks of life: cafeteria workers, bus drivers, anyone who might be the only one standing between life and death. And through it all, Jonas never stopped being himself, quietly helping, noticing, caring. In the end, the real resolution wasn't Avery's recovery or Jonas's redemption, but the way their stories, broken, bruised, unfinished, made space for each other, for Lena, for anyone who ever felt invisible or unheard. They sat together on a park bench, sharing fries, joking about garlic salt, watching Lena practice her whistle, and you could see it then. Three people, unlikely, ordinary, but whole in a way that didn't need explaining. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been changed by someone the world overlooked? Or have you ever been that someone? Share your story. Let the world see what it usually ignores, because sometimes the hero isn't the one with the title, but the one who never stops noticing. And if this story made you feel something, share it, because the world needs more people willing to see, to listen, to act, even if all they have is a mop and a heart that refuses to give up. Thank you for spending your time with us. And remember, sometimes being seen is the medicine we all need.